Hello, this is my presentation on the female reproductive system. Firstly, we start with the location of the female reproductive system, which is located centrally around the lower pelvic region, medial to the ilium, ischium, and pubis bones, which are circled in red. It extends from the pelvic cavity to the base of the pelvis, where it exits the inner regions of the body and joins with the skin. Next is the structure of the female reproductive system, which consists of five main organs, including the ovaries in red, fallopian tubes in yellow, uterus in green, vagina in blue, and vulva in orange. Following this are the reproductive system functions, with its primary function being to produce offspring. It can also stimulate the secretion of specific hormones such as estrogen, progesterone, gonadotropin releasing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, and human chorionic gonadotropin. Next, we look at the anatomy and functions of each of the female reproductive system's components, starting with the ovaries. The ovaries are the bilateral female gonads at approximately 4 times 2 times 3 centimeters in size and are located in the pelvic cavity medial to the fallopian tubes and laterally on either side of the uterus with a physical connection through the proper ovarian ligament, which is located at the ovary's inferiormost point, circled in red. The ovaries themselves contain many different inner areas, such as the more superficial ovarian cortex in yellow and the deeper ovarian medulla in green, with no clear border dividing the two areas. These areas differ in functions too, with the cortex being the location at which the oocyte and its associated cells develop, and the medulla containing the blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, and nerves as a more vascular form of dense connective tissue. Overall, the main functions of the ovaries is the production and release of oocytes and the synthesis of female sex hormones. Next, the fallopian tubes or uterine tubes are a paired structure that extends from the uterus, located laterally in the pelvic cavity. The fallopian tubes themselves are sized at around 10 centimeters in length, with the primary role of delivering the egg or oocyte towards the uterus. This occurs through the ovary first releasing the oocyte into the pelvic cavity, where the fallopian tubes are able to suck them up through the movement of finger-like projections called fimbriae, which are circled in green, occurring in wave-like movements and pulling in oocytes. The uterus is a singular midline-based organ with a thick uterine wall, consisting of three distinct layers: the outermost perimetrium, circled in red, the middle layer of myometrium, circled in blue, and the inner layer of endometrium. There are also two main different areas of the uterus, which include the body, which is the upper triangular area circled in green, and the cervix, which is the more cylindrical lower tighter area circled in yellow. The uterus is located between the bladder inferiorly and the rectum both superiorly and posteriorly, as well as being found in the pelvic cavity. However, during the cycle of pregnancy, this may expand to occupy much of the abdominal cavity to house the fetus. Finally, the vagina is a muscular tube that measures roughly 7 to 9 centimeters long, running between the uterus's cervix superiorly and the vulva inferiorly, as well as having the rectum and anus directly posterior and bladder directly anterior. The vagina also has three main functions. Firstly, serving as an excretory duct for menstrual fluid, secondly, forming part of the birth canal area, and finally, serving as the area of the female reproductive system that receives the penis and ejaculatory fluids such as sperm during sexual intercourse. Before getting into this topic, it is important to note that all the numbers on this cycle will be referring to a general 28-day cycle, and that all the following events and phases only occur given that a woman has begun puberty, has not fallen pregnant, and has not undergone menopause. The ovarian cycle consists of four main phases, which are the menstrual phase, the pre-ovulatory phase, ovulation, and the post-ovulatory phase. The menstrual phase lasts for approximately 5 days, with day 1 of the reproductive cycle generally being the first day of menstruation. It takes several months for an ovarian follicle to mature to the point where it is ready for ovulation, meaning that the events in this cycle surround the actions of multiple follicles, which are each at different stages in their development. During the menstrual phase, several primordial follicles begin maturing under the influence of follicle stimulating hormone, while the other follicles, which had already been stimulated in a previous cycle, are slowly progressing through the stages of primary and secondary follicles. The pre-ovulatory phase begins around the end of menstruation and ends at the start of ovulation, lasting roughly from day 6 to 13 of the reproductive cycle. Some of the follicles that were stimulated months prior have now become secondary follicles and are continuing to grow, with around day 6, one of them clearly outgrowing the rest, becoming the dominant follicle. The dominant follicle is then able to surge larger amounts of estrogen and inhibit production, both of which are hormones that inhibit the production of follicle stimulating hormone, resulting in the degeneration of the less developed follicles. As this occurs, the dominant follicle continues to develop, eventually becoming a mature Graafian follicle that can attach to the ovarian wall. Ovulation, unlike the other phases, occurs more as a specific moment in time rather than a process over several days, usually occurring on day 14 of a 28-day cycle. During ovulation, the mature Graafian follicle continues to release increasingly high amounts of estrogen, which, while in moderate levels acts as an inhibitor, in higher concentrations instead stimulates the release of gonadotropin releasing hormone, luteinizing hormone, and follicle stimulating hormone, leading to a spike in the levels of all three. Importantly, the increased luteinizing hormone levels result in mature Graafian follicle rupturing while attached to the ovarian wall, allowing for the secondary oocytes stored within to be expelled into the pelvic cavity, usually around 9 hours after the hormone levels peak. Finally, the post-ovulatory phase is the period that occurs after ovulation and before the next menstruation for non-impregnated women. This is generally the longest phase of the cycle, usually lasting from days 14 to 28. Immediately following ovulation, the remaining elements of the follicle collapse and some of the cells differentiate and alter their functions because of the luteinizing hormone. This creates a new structure known as the corpus luteum, which through its stimulation by luteinizing hormone releases other ovarian hormones such as estrogen, progesterone, relaxin, and inhibin. The continued survival of the corpus luteum depends on whether the secondary oocyte fertilization can occur. If fertilization is unable to occur, then moderate levels of ovarian hormones suppress the release of gonadotropin-releasing hormone, luteinizing hormones, and follicle-stimulating hormones, removing stimulation for the corpus luteum, and therefore subsequently resulting in its degeneration after about 2 weeks. If fertilization does occur, the growing embryo releases a hormone called human chorionic gonadotropin, which is important in taking over the role of the luteinizing hormone in stimulating the corpus luteum and keeping its cells alive, allowing the continued release of ovarian hormones.